It was broad daylight. The kind of day where nothing feels threatening. Sunlight filled the street. People moved freely, confidently, without fear. A busy public place. Shops open. Cars passing. Voices overlapping. Laughter mixed with footsteps. Everything looked normal. Steven Seagal and his wife were there like everyone else. Dressed simply, no security, no attention. Just another couple moving through a crowd that believed daylight meant safety. Then it happened. A man said something. Not loud enough to cause a scene, but clear enough to be heard. Disrespectful. Targeted. Steven Seagal's wife froze for a second. Her expression changed, not fear yet, but discomfort. That quiet moment when dignity is tested in public. People nearby heard it. Some glanced over. Some pretended not to notice. Some kept walking. No one reacted. That is how it usually happens. Wrong doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it slips in quietly, testing how much it can get away with. The man smiled. Confidence grew when silence answered him. He took it further. Another comment. Closer this time. More deliberate. Now it was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a line being crossed in front of everyone. Steven noticed. He didn't explode. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. He simply stopped walking. In that moment, the world felt different. Still bright, still loud, but something invisible had shifted. This wasn't about anger. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about human effort, the effort it takes to stay controlled when instinct demands reaction. The man had chosen the wrong target. Not because of fame, not because of strength, but because he mistook calm for weakness, and everyone around them felt it. That subtle pause, that silent tension, no fight yet, no chaos. Just a moment where everything that felt normal suddenly wasn't. Daylight didn't protect anyone. Crowds didn't help. Silence gave permission. And in that space between disrespect and response, a decision was about to be made. Not one driven by rage, but by discipline, by restraint, by the effort it takes to stand up without losing control. This is the part people rarely talk about, the moment before action. The moment where most people look away. Have you ever seen something wrong happen in broad daylight? With people all around, and still no one stepped in? What would you have done in that moment? It was a bright afternoon. Sunlight reflected off glass windows and parked cars. Shadows were short, soft, harmless. The kind of light that makes people feel safe without thinking about it. The street was alive. People walked in every direction. Some talked loudly. Some laughed. Some stared at their phones. Others carried bags, coffee cups, small pieces of ordinary life. Nothing felt dangerous. Steven Seagal and his wife moved through the crowd slowly, not rushed, not guarded, just present. They wore simple clothes, comfortable, unremarkable, no bodyguards, no signs of fame, no reason for anyone to look twice. To the world around them, they were just another couple enjoying the day. And that is why moments like this matter. Because daylight creates an illusion. It convinces people that safety is automatic, that danger announces itself, that threats only appear in dark corners or empty streets. But most disrespect doesn't come with warning. It hides in plain sight. Steven's wife walked confidently at first, relaxed shoulders, calm pace, the posture of someone who feels secure. Steven stayed close, not protective in appearance but attentive, not watching the crowd with suspicion, just aware, human awareness, the kind built over years of experience, not paranoia. Around them, life continued uninterrupted. A group of friends laughed loudly behind them. Someone bumped into another person and apologized without stopping. A vendor called out to passersby. Normal life, normal noise, normal comfort. And that comfort is exactly what allows lines to be crossed. People assume someone else will step in. They assume daylight means witnesses. They assume witnesses mean safety. But disrespect doesn't need darkness. It only needs silence. This is why public spaces can be dangerous in a different way. Not because no one is there, but because everyone is there. Responsibility spreads thin in crowds. Courage becomes optional, attention fades. Steven understood this, not as a celebrity, not as a fighter, but as a man who knew how easily control could slip when people stopped paying attention. This was not about anticipating violence. It was about recognizing vulnerability, the vulnerability that exists even in the brightest light. Nothing had happened yet, no confrontation, no raised voices. But something subtle had begun, a shift too quiet for most to notice. The calm world remained intact on the surface, but underneath it, the conditions for conflict were forming. That is why this moment matters, because when people say, "I never thought it would happen here," or "I didn't expect it in the daytime," they are usually already too late. And as Steven and his wife moved forward, surrounded by noise, laughter, and sunlight, the crowd remained unaware that the illusion of safety was about to be tested. Not by darkness, but by human choice. It started quietly, the way most public disrespect does. A group of men stood off to the side, casual posture, loose confidence, the kind that comes from being surrounded by people who won't interfere. Their eyes followed Steven Seagal's wife as she passed, not curiosity, not admiration, something colder. One of them said something, not shouted, not whispered, spoken just loud enough to be heard. The words landed heavy, sharp, uninvited. Steven's wife felt it immediately. Her steps slowed, her shoulders stiffened, that sudden awareness that strangers were no longer just strangers. Another comment followed, this one clearer, deliberate, meant to be noticed. A few people nearby heard it. Heads turned briefly, eyes flicked in their direction. Then something familiar happened. Nothing. No one spoke, no one objected, no one stepped closer. The crowd absorbed the moment and kept moving. Steven's wife paused, not because she wanted attention, but because embarrassment has weight. She felt exposed, seen, reduced to something she never agreed to be. Her instinct was to keep walking, to shrink the moment, to let it pass. That instinct is human. Disrespect in public doesn't just attack dignity, it tests how alone someone really is. Steven noticed the pause. He turned his head slowly, not aggressively, not suddenly, just enough to see. His expression didn't change, no anger, no tension in his face, only alertness. The kind that comes when someone recognizes a boundary being crossed. The men noticed him looking, and instead of stopping, they smiled. Silence had encouraged them. One of them leaned slightly forward. Another remark followed, sharper, more confident. This time there was no doubt. This was intentional humiliation. People heard it clearly now. Some frowned, some looked uncomfortable. But still no one spoke. Silence stretched, and in that silence the moment grew heavier. Steven's wife lowered her gaze briefly, not in weakness, but in the way people do when they are deciding how much attention something deserves. Steven took a breath. Still calm, still controlled, but fully present. This was no longer about ignoring words. This was about what silence was allowing. The crowd had a choice. They always do. But most people choose distance over involvement, comfort over responsibility. The men felt it. That absence of resistance, that quiet permission. And that is how disrespect survives in public, not because everyone agrees, but because too many say nothing. Steven turned his body slightly now, not confrontational, not defensive, just enough to signal awareness. The atmosphere shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. People sensed it even if they didn't understand it. That pause, that tension. Something was about to change. And the real question was no longer about the men who spoke. It was about everyone who heard. When someone is humiliated in public, and people stay silent, is that silence just fear, or is it a form of support? What do you think Steven felt the moment before it fully arrived? That subtle shift when a situation stops being harmless and starts demanding a response. He could react instantly. Years of training had conditioned his body to move faster than thought. He knew exactly how to stop it, exactly how much force it would take. But he didn't move. Not yet. Because this moment wasn't about ability. It wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about dominance. This was about dignity. He glanced at his wife, not to ask permission, not to reassure her with words, just to understand what she needed. Her posture said everything. She wasn't afraid. She was uncomfortable, exposed, put in a position she never asked for, and that mattered more than ego ever could. Steven took a slow breath, the kind people don't notice, but the kind that signals control. This is the part no one sees, the internal effort, the discipline it takes to hold back when instinct pushes forward. Anyone can react, few can restrain themselves. He knew the cost of losing control, not just physically, but socially, morally, a public space, daylight, people watching. If he exploded, the story would change. It would stop being about disrespect and become about violence. He refused to let that happen. So he chose restraint, not weakness, not hesitation. Choice. Steven stepped forward, not aggressively, not suddenly, one measured step. His body language was calm, open, protective. He positioned himself slightly ahead of his wife, not hiding her, not shielding her dramatically. Just enough to make a statement. This space matters. He didn't raise his voice, didn't clench his fists. His face showed no anger, only presence. This is human effort at its highest level, emotional control under pressure, mental discipline when reaction feels justified. The men noticed immediately. Confidence wavered, not because of fear yet, but because something unexpected had happened. Calm had entered the moment. Steven wasn't there to perform. He wasn't there to threaten. He was there to protect. And protection doesn't need noise. The crowd felt it too. That shift, that pause where everyone realized this wasn't going to be a spectacle. This was going to be a decision. Steven's heart rate stayed steady, his posture grounded, his focus clear. This wasn't about winning. It was about stopping something before it grew. Most people think strength is visible, loud, explosive. But real strength often looks quiet, still, measured. This was the moment where the outcome was decided. Not with force, but with restraint. And the effort it took was far greater than throwing a punch ever would be, because holding back requires intention, awareness, responsibility. Steven stood there fully present, fully human, waiting not for permission, but for the right moment to act, without losing who he was. What do you think real strength is, physical power, or emotional control when it matters most? Steven spoke clearly. Not loud, not aggressive. His voice carried just enough weight to be heard. This stops now. People nearby turned their heads, not because of volume, but because of certainty. He continued calmly. There is no reason for this. You should apologize, and then walk away. No insults, no threats, just firm direction. The criminals looked at each other, surprised, amused. One of them laughed. Not nervous laughter, mocking laughter. He stepped closer, closing the distance, testing boundaries. Who do you think you are? The crowd thickened. People slowed their steps. Some stopped walking altogether. Phones appeared, raised hands, recording lenses. No one spoke up. Steven noticed everything. The movement, the silence, the attention. He adjusted his position slightly, one step sideways. Now he stood between his wife and the threat. Not dramatic, not protective in a loud way, just correct. This was instinct guided by discipline. A human decision made in real time. The criminal leaned in again, too close now. Steven did not retreat, did not advance. He held his ground. His posture said everything. This goes no further. The criminal smirked, looking around, playing to the audience. This guy thinks he is tough. Some people laughed awkwardly. Others looked away. Steven felt the pressure build, the kind that pushes people to act out, to prove something. He resisted it. That resistance was effort. His body was ready. His mind was steady. He repeated himself slower this time. Step back, apologize, and leave. The words were simple. The meaning was not. This was a final boundary. The criminal did not like that. He moved again. Closer, too close. The crowd held its breath. Phones kept recording. No one intervened. Steven shifted again, just enough to block the path, just enough to protect. No shove, no contact. Pure positioning. This is where most situations explode, where ego takes control, where anger decides the outcome. Steven refused that path. He stayed human, focused, responsible. He knew everyone was watching, not just the criminal, the crowd, the cameras, his wife. Every move mattered. The criminal raised his voice. Trying to provoke, Steven did not respond emotionally. Silence can be louder than shouting. This confrontation was no longer private. It was public, daylight, open space. And still, no one stepped in. People recorded instead. Steven stood firm, a barrier made of restraint. This was escalation without violence, tension without chaos, a test of character. And the outcome was about to be decided. If you were standing there, watching this unfold in daylight, would you step in, or would you keep recording and stay silent? Daylight makes everything visible. Faces, intentions, choices. There was no darkness to hide behind, no confusion, no excuse for misunderstanding. Everyone could see what was happening. The criminal shifted his stance. Shoulders squared, chest forward. This was not about words anymore. This was about dominance. He reached out, not fast, not skilled, just reckless. A move meant to intimidate. Steven reacted once, not explosively, not emotionally. Just once, a single controlled movement. He redirected the arm, turned the angle, broke the balance. No punch, no strike. The criminal stumbled. Shock replaced confidence. It happened so quickly, yet so cleanly, that people struggled to understand what they had just seen. The man did not fall hard. He was not injured, but his power was gone. His dominance ended in a second. Steven released him immediately. No follow-up, no punishment, just control. The criminal stepped back, breathing fast, eyes wide. Fear had replaced arrogance. The crowd froze. Phones stayed raised, but hands trembled now. This was not entertainment anymore. This was authority. Steven stood still, breathing steady, posture relaxed. He did not chase. Did not. He spoke quietly. This is over. Not a command, a fact. The criminal looked around, his group no longer smiling, no longer loud. They pulled him back, murmuring, avoiding eye contact. They understood something had shifted. Not because of violence, but because of discipline. Daylight showed the truth. Power does not need rage. Control does not need noise. Steven turned slightly, checked on his wife. She was safe. That was the purpose. Nothing more, nothing less. The crowd slowly exhaled. Some lowered their phones. Others looked away in discomfort. They had witnessed effort. Real effort. The effort to restrain instinct, to choose technique over aggression, to protect without destroying. This was not cinematic. It was human. Anyone can swing a fist. Few can stop when they have the advantage. Steven chose restraint. That choice ended the threat. Security approached late, Too late to matter. The danger had already passed. People began talking quietly, replaying the moment. Not impressed by force, but unsettled by control. The criminal left, head lowered, ego Sharon's. No chaos, just daylight returning to normal. Steven and his wife moved on. No speeches, no attention. The crowd stayed behind, thinking. Because what they saw challenged something. The idea that strength is loud, the belief that aggression wins. What ended the threat was effort. Mental discipline, physical restraint, moral clarity. Lesson: reckless power burns fast, human discipline lasts longer. Do you believe real strength is knowing how to stop, or knowing when to stop? Share your opinion in the comments. The crowd began to react, but only slowly. The immediate danger had passed before most realized it had ever existed. People whispered among themselves. Some exhaled deeply. Some raised their phones again, trying to capture what had already happened. Security arrived, stepping into the scene with cautious authority. By then, there was no need for intervention. The threat had been neutralized. No one had been hurt. No one had been humiliated further. Steven turned to his wife, his eyes calm, steady. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, not because she wasn't shaken, but because she had witnessed something rare. Something that mattered more than the fear she had felt moments before. Around them, people started talking quietly. A murmur rose. Questions whispered. What just happened? Did you see that? That man, he didn't fight, but he stopped it. Video clips began circulating immediately. Phones captured the aftermath, the crowd, the stillness. But the clips weren't viral because of violence. They weren't shocking because of aggression. They went viral because of restraint. Because viewers saw someone capable of immense power, who chose control over chaos, discipline over rage. Discussions broke out online. Some praised Steven's quick thinking. Some debated the ethical lessons. Some asked themselves, would I have had the courage to act like that? The street eventually returned to normal. Sunlight still illuminated the sidewalks. People resumed walking, talking, living their ordinary lives. But everyone who had been there carried a sense of something unforgettable. This was a lesson that could not be ignored. The strongest person in the room is not always the one who shouts the loudest, or strikes first, or wins the fight physically. The strongest person is the one who protects those who cannot defend themselves, without losing control, without creating chaos, without letting anger dictate their actions. Steven and his wife walked away. No cheers, no celebration, just dignity preserved, just a lesson silently taught to everyone who had witnessed it. Later, as videos circulated, comments filled with awe and respect appeared. People wrote about the power of calmness, the strength of discipline, the human effort it takes to act correctly in moments of public danger. Parents discussed it with children. Strangers debated it online. Opinions varied, but one thing was consistent. Everyone recognized that real power does not always look like fighting. It can look quiet, measured, human. For those watching, the question remained, when confronted with a wrong, especially in public, would you stand up and act? Or would you stay silent, letting circumstances dictate the outcome? This was the moment when ordinary people began reflecting on courage. Not the courage to fight, but the courage to choose the right action. Because strength without control is just recklessness, and in the daylight, for everyone to see, that lesson could not be mistaken. Do you believe real strength is protecting others in public without losing control? Type respect in the comments if you agree, and tell us, what would you have done in that moment? Would you have stepped in, or stayed silent? The video would continue to spread, not for the fight that didn't happen, but for the restraint that defined it. And that ultimately is the lesson everyone could take away. True power is not in how hard you hit, but in how well you control yourself when it matters most.